Hello and welcome to the show today. I am your host and founder of Heaven to Earth, Susan Fleming, business alignment therapist, equipping kingdom leadership to multiply life without burnout. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss a thing. Welcome back for this week's episode. I am so excited to introduce you to Julia Winston. Julia is the elite business advisor that every millions mandated kingdom entrepreneur wishes they had. Unlike other coaches and mentors who are focused on teaching you their way of success, Julia is dedicated to helping you chart your personalized success course based on who you are, what you carry, and where you are to unleash it. Julia has done leadership development and coaching work for individuals and organizations such as GE, Chick-Fil-A, the U.S. Department of Agriculture, city municipalities, Fisk University, the University of Mississippi, and Baptist Hospital. Julia is a former member of the Forbes Coaches Council. She holds 2 coaching certifications. She also has a master's degree in human resource development. She is an award-winning keynote speaker and trainer. She is the CEO of Brave Leadership Consulting, the founder of the Alignment Advantage, the founder of the Insight Network, and the author of Pray the Kingdom Way, How to See an ROI on Earth as it is in heaven. Oh, this gets me so fired up. I am just thrilled. I could keep going. There's so much, Julia. Julia is just such a treasure, and she has so much gold to share with us that I've actually decided I'm going to split this into 2 parts. We're going to do 2 interviews because there's just so much wisdom and richness in what she shares. And so I didn't want to limit her in her responses and just give her the floor for explaining, revelating, prophesying, wherever she wants to go. I'm here for it. So we're going to do this as a 2-parter, and I'm so excited about it. Please help me welcome Miss Julia Winston.
I am so excited to be here with you, Susan. You are amazing, and I love this series.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I'm really excited to have this conversation with you about leadership. I know that's your jam. So looking forward to diving into this. So let's just set the scene for the viewers and take me back to 12-year-old Julia. What were you doing? What were you like?
Do I have to? Do I have to take you back to 12-year-old Julia? It's interesting because people always say, like, when you're trying to figure out your life purpose, like, go back to when you were a kid and the things that you were doing and the things that you love to do and whatnot. And I have tried that several times, and it was never fruitful. It was never a fruitful exercise because at 12, I was so to myself. Like, I would never say I was an introverted person, right? But people probably would characterize me as shy. Just my life upbringing at that point, I just didn't want to rock the boat. I was like, I don't want to rock the boat, Julia. I don't want to get anybody mad at me. And so I just kind of stayed to myself and tried to be invisible. That sounds so terrible, but it's that age, like that preteen age where you don't know anything, but you think you know stuff. You have a little bit of knowledge of things. And so it was a time where I really didn't feel like I fit in anywhere. And I just had to be okay with that. I wasn't cool enough for the cool kids. I wasn't dorky enough for the nerds. I wasn't athletic enough for the athletes. I wasn't fumbly enough for the, it was just this place where I just didn't feel like I had a function or I had a place where it was just me and that's how I just fit in. So I found it interesting when I was just thinking about that. I was like, oh my gosh, I was really trying to find my own lane, but desperately wanting to be a part of others, right? Or at least find other people that could be in my lane. And I didn't find that until, a couple of years later. But yeah, that was 12-year-old me.
But I think that's so great to point out that who you were at that point doesn't mean that's who you're going to be, right? Like I'm with you on the whole, like, go back to this age or whatever thing, and it doesn't line up because that's me too. Like I was not at all what I'm like today. So
Yeah.
I love that you bring that out.
And can I say, I think that's important when we're having this discussion around leaders, because it is assumed, and it's actually become part of my story, because I would tell people, I never thought I was a leader. I never thought I would be an entrepreneur, because I had a very clear, concrete definition of who those people were, what they did, from the time they, from little, right? You hear about the entrepreneur who was a serial entrepreneur, had lemonade stands, paper routes, and doing all of these things to make money, cutting grasses in the neighborhood, doing all these things to make money from a young age. And so it was like very clear, oh, that person's going to be an entrepreneur, or, oh, that person's going to be a leader. I was never that kid that stepped into the room, was like, hear ye, everybody listen to me, right? Like I was never that kid who wanted to take charge. I was that kid who sat back. And it wasn't until Maxwell's law of, I think it was what, E.F. Hutton, I think it was, when a true leader speaks, people listen. It wasn't until I read that and later on in my life that I recognized that there was some leadership qualities in me, even though I wasn't the boisterous, like very obvious leader. There are people that you see, they're like, yeah, they lead something. I don't know what it is. They might just be leading them, but it's just super clear. And I never saw myself that way. And for, for the viewers and the listeners, in this conversation, it's important to understand that leadership looks different on people. So as you are equipping leaders to multiply, one of the things that, I think, and what I love about what you're doing is, you're bringing a variety of leaders to people so they can see themselves, because representation is important. And we've seen that representation of that D personality, I'm gonna go get it, I eat challenge for breakfast type person, like, let's just keep going. We've seen that representation, and now it's time to see the broader diaspora of leadership.
Yes, absolutely. And that's another reason that I love that when the Lord gave me the names for this series, it was all women. Like that just fires me up because, like you say, we have I think a lot of people have a clear vision of what they think a leader is. And most of the time, it's not a woman.
Yeah.
Right? That stereotypical white male, strong personality. And so I love that, that he gave me such a variety. But they were all women. So that excites me.
Yeah.
Yeah. So at what point do you feel like you really caught that vision of what God wanted you to do, or what he was inviting you into, and maybe who he was calling you to serve?
Yeah, I was thinking about that, and I was like, was there a point, or was it more of a series of events? Then I stopped and then I reflected. And I think that's what happened for me was I've always been a reflector, because I believe in the power of reflection, because there are data points in our history, there are data points in our past that, if interpreted properly, can really give us some fire for what can we do next. But if we never stop long enough, pause long enough, rest long enough to reflect, then we can miss out on some of those things, right? So and I think that goes back to that quiet, 12-year-old Julia, where I observed a lot and I didn't feel the need to say anything. Like, I have a son now who he feels the need to say a lot of things. And then I have that other, my other son who doesn't. And so when I took the time to reflect, I was like, it became a question of, I don't even know why this is happening to me. Why are leaders reaching out to me? Like, you run a company, you run a department, you run a big business. How did you get my name? Like, how do you even know who I am? Like, why are you, reaching out? And that was a common thread that I saw, that I had this connection with leaders that I didn't seek. And it was this favorable, there was this favor that I seemed to have when it came to leaders. And I didn't understand why. And so the first part of the reflection was, wait a minute, I always seem to have favor or conversations or interactions with leaders. That's interesting. And then I just kept going, well, why? And so once I stopped asking why, then I was like, well, what's happening? Why are they calling me? Why are they reaching out to me? What is going on in our conversations that is the same? And so pattern recognition became something that I just kept looking for. It was like, well, tell me about this. So I was not that vision board, like it was on my vision board to work with this person. I was not that, I'm going to speak this and declare, like, I'm going to work with this one. And I never did that. I never did that. I would have these experiences, pause, and then go, God, what are you saying to me in this? Like, let's reflect on this and help me interpret this properly. Because, man, one of the things that I think is, we're in a season right now, or in a time right now, where God is redefining, not because the definition was wrong. He is redefining because the interpretation of the experience was wrong. He's like, hey, let me redefine that for you, right? A lot of the buzzword going around is kind of reframing, right? Reframing this. So when I look at a situation, I could have looked at the situation and said, I'm just this, poor Black girl from the inner city. I didn't have the big hair at the time, right? But I was like, and I have no experience running a Fortune 500 company or this, that, and the other. I don't have any of these experiences that people would say. In fact, when I got into executive coaching, when I first got into executive coaching, I remember being at an event, and I always looked younger than my peers in that space. And a lot of executive coaches at the time that I started were retired CEOs who kind of hung their hats out and was like, okay, in my second or third act of life, this is what I want to do. And I never did that. I started off, really in this. And so someone challenged me at an event one time, and they said, well, what made you think you could do what you're doing? And I said, without skipping a beat, it was a rare moment of like self-confidence. And I was like, what, the results that I get from my clients, like, they're the ones that tell me I should be doing what I'm doing. Because when I got into conversations with leaders, I found out that I was a safe place for them. Mm-hmm. I found out that I wasn't looking for them to build me up. I wasn't using them as a clout. I wasn't using them to say, hey, these are the people that I worked with and did all those things. I wasn't doing that. I was a safe place for them to say, you know what? I hate this. I'm in charge of all these people, and I don't feel like I know what I'm doing. I have this going on, I have this going on, and all those things. And that was that safe space for them. And so when I started looking at, first it was, let me reflect leaders. I keep connecting with a whole bunch of leaders. And then let me reflect again, what is happening with those leaders? And it was, they needed a safe space to process some things. Okay. And then it became, well, it's not just leaders who need a safe space. It's actually leaders who are in my space and the people I'm called to, leaders who are kind of pioneering and forerunning. And I was like, that's interesting. And then upon reflection again, it was, okay, but they're pioneering and forerunning something that God has placed inside of their heart that there isn't a blueprint for. And that space of being there for that pioneering and, what I coined the apostolic CEO of, like, this is something that God is calling you to do in business. And then recognizing, okay, there are certain places of business, right? So that leader went from just a leader in general to founder CEOs of companies. So all of those things, I don't think it was a moment. It was a series of reflections on where doors opened, where opportunities were presented to me, and the things that I liked. Because let's be real, there are opportunities that are presented to you that you're like, thank you, but I don't want to do that. Like everybody wanted me to work with kids, Susan. I just, I didn't get that. Like, oh, and I was like, I don't know, maybe it's because the external bubbly personality or something of that nature that I could. And I was like, oh my gosh, please no, I do not want to work with children at all. Like and I was like, God, if any of my kids have teachers who are like me, like move them. Either move the teacher or move my kids, because like you want people who love to do what they're doing. There's nothing worse than someone who hates their job and they know it and everybody can feel it. And so I was like, why do these people keep saying? So there are opportunities there are things that you're good at that you probably could excel in, but when you think about what lights you up and what you're doing there, that's important. And that's a part of that individual and personalized leadership that comes. So there wasn't a moment, there were a series of things that I reflected on, and then, had and asked the Holy Spirit to help me make the right conclusions about these things, about what those things were teaching me.
I love that so much because it's, again, not looking to a mold, right? Like not looking and going, well, I don't really fit into that, so that must not be for me, So I just I love that so much. That process that you explained there of not just reflecting, but then asking Holy Spirit for the correct interpretation. That's huge. That is a huge, huge key. Because you're right, there's so many things, especially as as entrepreneurs or as a leader, there's so many things that we can do,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like there's so many things. The options are there. And so how do you sift through which one?
Yeah.
And that point you brought up too about, well, what do you enjoy?
Yes. Yes.
Like people don't tell you to ask yourself, what do I really enjoy doing?
Yeah. One of my favorite movies is The Accountant, starring Ben Affleck. I think Ben Affleck. Anyway, I'm a big movie person. I make movie references all the time. And I was watching that movie recently, and he's on the spectrum, and so he was trying to, so somebody who didn't know that was trying to kind of make some small talk with him, and that's typically hard for him. And so the question was, so how did you get into accounting? Just one of those like, hey, how did you get into the things? And he said, well, the U.S. Department of Labor Statistics said that it was the most highest great rating growing field, so that's what I chose, right? And I know people, whether they're on the spectrum or not, like, let's be real, they look at what has the most growth right now. So tech, right? I remember commercials for this was several years ago, probably a decade now. Ooh, where it was like, hey, there's going to be a nursing shortage, and everybody and their mama was coming out with a nursing certification program. And there was like all of this big push to get nurses because there was going to be a nursing shortage, because according to the U.S. Department of Labor and Statistics. And so I know some people who pick careers that way. Maybe they have a legacy. Maybe they have a family who everybody in their families were academics, and so they went into academia. Maybe everybody were in science or law or something of that nature. And so it's expected for them to do the exact same thing. And when you don't fit a mold, but you are highly skilled and you can do many things well, and you really don't think about it, right? You just can put you in and you are excelling. You just continue to rise to the top, even if you're not wanting to, even if you're not that, hey, look at me, your skill set just does that. Then it behooves you to then think about, okay, I can do a lot, but what do I really want to do? What is that thing that is inside of me? And I think it's important for future leaders, right? Emerging leaders, for people who really don't consider themselves leaders because of this. In fact, I did write a part of I did get published in Forbes.com, and I was talking about this idea of reluctant leader, which is this idea that you have the ability to lead very well, but you choose not to because of negative connotations that you have associated with leadership, right? Leaders get blasted. Leaders are criticized. You know, a leader can surround itself with counsel, and the counsel could be wrong, but it's the leader who is, remembered for making that decision, right? If everybody talks about in recent history and George Bush and weapons of mass destruction, and guess what? It turned out there were no weapons of mass destruction, but it wasn't his counsel. No one was like, his advisors were wrong, right? It was George H.W. or I can't, whatever. He doesn't know what he's talking about, and blah blah blah. And every leader has those things where the buck kind of stops there. And so because of that, because of the backlash, right? If you want to start a fight about anything, just post an opinion online. How can you have that opinion? Blah 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 blah. Right? And so we see the backlash. We see the stories of leaders and their families, and families taking a hit because they're trying to excel and do some things in their business or their careers. We see all of these negative stories, and those people who are not challenged, I'll eat challenge for breakfast, they look at that and go, no, thank you. Why would I sign up for that? Like, that makes no sense whatsoever, right? But in the bell curve of who you are, right? On the one end, you got those people, they're going to lead no matter what. They're going to be driven, they're self-motivated, they're internally motivated, they're going to do it. Then on the other end, you got those people, they will never lead a thing in their lives. There's nothing that you can do, say, or a situation that will change their mind. But you have so many people in the middle who, with some tweaks on who they are, what leadership is, could really be the next thing that someone needs. But the way they are designed and the way they are equipped and the way they need to be equipped has to look different. Because if it doesn't look different, then they will continue to exclude themselves from the conversations when they should be in those conversations.
Yeah. So where would you put yourself on that curve? Were you, once you figured out like this is the thing?
Yeah.
Are you like tunnel vision focused straight ahead, or you're still a middle person? Like,
no, I definitely, I would say I was definitely part of the masses in the middle of that bell. My husband's not an entrepreneur, and he has worked for the same company for over 20 years. And he went to school for a thing, got a job doing that thing out of school, and he's been in that company doing those things over the course of years. Things change, but basically it's just been this kind of like straight line of like, okay, this next, and that's just kind of the person he is. And then there's this one who was like, it was like Flight of the Bumblebee. My development was like, I was like all around, and I'm like, how in the world is that connected? And how does this match with this? And how did this thing connect with this thing? And there were no connections at all until I started asking the Lord for that. Like, show me what these connections are. And one of the things that makes me really excel at what I do right now is seeing those patterns that don't seem to connect for people and helping make them connect. And it's like, yes, of course, you go to school for engineering, you get a job as an engineer, you do engineering stuff. That makes sense. But when you go to school for engineering, and then you get a job as a painter, and then you get a job as an accountant, and then you get a job as or you do something, now you're working with nonprofits and children, and now you're making scissors. How in the world does all of that connect? And there is some point in the lives of the people that I, work with now, where they have all of these varied experiences and going, well, it was a waste of time. My 4-year education as an engineer was a waste of time because I started doing art. And it's like, well, did you know that some of the most famous artists were also mathematicians? So art and math have always been connected. Well, did you know that some of the most famous business people have been nonprofit philanthropists? And, like, this whole organization exists, this whole foundation exists to support arts because business people had a love for this, right? So there's always these connections that can be made. And so when people who break the mold don't know they're breaking the mold, they don't think of themselves as mold breakers.
Mm.
They think of themselves as weird. And is something wrong with me? Again, you have that small sliver of the curve. People are like, there's nothing wrong with me. I'm absolutely fabulous. Y'all need to catch up. You have those people who think that way naturally, yay and wonderful. But then you have those people that go, wait, is there something going on with me? Because I'm not like that. When I think about leaders and what I think about that next path, it doesn't look linear. It's never been linear. What's wrong with me that I'm not linear? And then the answer is very simple. Nothing's wrong with you. You were made for something that is non-linear. And when you get there, and I guarantee you, like when people find their fit, and I see this happen all the time, I love, that I get to do what I get to do, because then it becomes, when you find your place of fit, then you look back and go, oh, my life really was linear, because it made a straight line to this point, and I was looking at another set of data points that I thought I had to fit into, and I didn't fit into those data points. But when I looked at the data set that I was created for, it makes absolutely sense. It makes absolute sense that I am here doing what I'm doing. I am the way that I am, right? So when I look at Shy Julia and go, she wasn't a leader from the beginning, I was like, well, I can't write about reluctant leadership until I recognized that was me. I was a reluctant leader, because I'd always worked with leaders I was a great number one. I was a great number one, right? I didn't have to have a spotlight. You need to shine, you need to do your thing, no problem. I'm going to make that environment fantastic for you to do that thing. And I say even today, like I'm a great pair of Spanx, right? When people look at you, those who wear Spanx, and there are men who wear Spanx, but when people look at you, they're not looking going, oh my gosh, her shapewear is amazing. They don't, and that's not the point. When they look at you in that dress or in that outfit, they're seeing, like, they say, you're amazing. They don't know the shapewear that's underneath that. They don't know how that shapewear is sweaty and might be a little stinky, and it was probably hard to get on. They didn't see you shimmy into it, before you came down the stairs. They didn't see any of that. All they saw was what you look like now. And as someone who is called to walk beside leaders, I get to see the good, bad, and the ugly. I get to see the sweaty parts. I get to smell the stinky. And I get to say, you know what? But as you do this thing, you're going to look amazing. So let's continue to work on it. I know shimmying into this looks hard, feels difficult, but that's okay. You're going to do it. You're going to get in there, and boom, you're going to look amazing, right? And so it makes complete sense that Shy Julia, who was someone's great number one, didn't know why leaders kept connecting, but then saw that I was that safe space, that I wasn't trying to clout chase, right? That I wasn't trying to, get my 15 minutes of fame by saying I'm connected to this one and that one. That just kept, transforming and developing into, really what I do, and how I just had to accept that. Paul wrote a lot of the Bible, but there wouldn't have been a Paul without a Barnabas. And there's so many Barnabases, Barnabi, Barnabases, I don't know what it is, right? I don't know the right plural for that, right? But there's so many Barnabases. There's so many people who were the undergirding, who were the people who you will never hear about, to the people that you hear about all the time. And it took me a minute to go, okay, God, is that what you're calling me to do? Right? We love Walt Disney. Well, some people do, some people don't. I know people who absolutely love Walt Disney. But there would have been no Walt without Roy. There would have been no Walt without Roy. There would have been no Steve Jobs without Wozniak, right? And so there's certain people in your life where, you have to recognize that they're part of that development. And if you weren't born into a family where, oh, I have Roy in my family. Sure, Roy, hey, come do this for me. Or I can have this, these other people that I've just stumbled upon, and I'm like, oh, I'm fortunate enough to have this. Then having someone as an advisor to say, hey, I get where you are, and let's talk about how what you're doing is amazing. What's next for you, even when you are breaking the mold. Because mold breakers, all they feel is uncomfortable. It's not until history, you look back on history, then it was like, oh my gosh, you were doing something historic. It's like, no, you were pioneering something. They're not thinking about that. All they're thinking is, I'm standing in front of jungle and I got a machete in my hand and I got to hatchet this thing down. They're not thinking about the path that they're leaving, behind for other people to follow. They're thinking, ouch, I got bit, scratched, all of these other things. What am I doing? There's nothing here. Why do I keep going forward? So I think about people that way. And and that's leadership, right? There is something about that says, it makes no sense, but I'm gonna keep doing this anyway, because maybe one day it will make sense. And I'm willing to take that ride. I could talk forever, Susan. I'm sorry. This conversation excites me. And, I just want people to know that when you are a mold breaker, it looks different. And you have to be around people who recognize that your development path is different, and try to and listen to what God wants to say about how you need to develop what's next for you, versus all the conventional wisdom. And conventional wisdom is great. We need conventional wisdom. It helps so many people, but for that pioneer and for that trailblazer, yeah, it's going to be different for you. And you need to have people in your life who's not going to try to make you into the very thing that you're trying to break out of. Just help you step into whatever God's called you to do. So important, so important.
Yeah. And so much of what you're saying, I just hear in it, you're really speaking to authenticity, really stepping into who is that person that you are, not looking around and going, well, who does everybody else think I should be?
Right.
Who am I? And getting comfortable with, maybe I'm different than everybody else, but I love that me. I love that I'm different than everybody else, and really owning that.
Yes.
And I feel like that's something that you have done, and how you really show up. Like, I don't feel like there's any, I don't know, any pretense with you. You're just like, hey, I'm Julia. This is me, and I love that. I love that. And I definitely think that's what people are drawn to, is just your authenticity and the confidence that you show up in, just being you. Just being you. That's so important. So for somebody watching, how have you been able to do that? To step into, to be yourself and really show up authentically?
Yeah, it's, when I hear people say that about me, sometimes I want to turn around and go, you're talking to me? Because I remember thinking, and there are times even in my entrepreneurial journey now, it's like, Julia, this is the type of entrepreneur you have to be. And I'm like, yeah, I don't like that. I don't like her. And it was, or I just didn't like that idea. And so sometimes the dissonance, like pioneers and trailblazers, status quo is something, there's something about a status quo. There's something about the way things have always been done that will naturally, you will come to either disdain, you will come to disdain. How soon or how quickly you come to disdain it is dependent upon your developmental journey, because there could be some things that was like, that never sat right with me, but I'm young, I'm new, I'm whatever, these people know better, sure, we'll try it that way, because never really did that thing for me, never really jive with that, but okay, that's what everyone says, so sure, no problem, I'm gonna do that. And so I spent a lot of my time in my leadership development, in my entrepreneurial journey, doing that. The successful people said, do it this way. I'm not successful yet. I'm not successful yet. So if successful people say, do it this way, okay, I'm going to do it that way, because they're successful. And so, we hear these cliches. We hear the leaders are readers. So, I mean, I haven't had a chance to complete a whole book in like 15 years, but now leaders are readers. So now I have to figure out how to try to read 17 books in a month to keep, because to keep up with all of these sayings, right, that people say about leadership. And so what I did was I did it. I said, I didn't think I could work hard enough to be an entrepreneur. I never thought I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I kind of was like, man, like this whole idea of like entrepreneurship is the only thing that you will quit a 40-hour-a-week job, maybe 50 hours a week, to work nonstop around the clock all the time. Like that is the only, and for what? And there's this idea that because I'm doing it for me, it makes it better. I don't know. And so I started doing the things, right? I I have a master's degree in human resource development with emphasis in with emphasis in like training and development area, right? So that individual professional development has always been my thing. Leadership has always been my thing. Got a, coaching certifications in executive coaching, personal coaching, things of that nature, right? So the craft, the art of what I wanted to do was kind of there. But other stuff, I just didn't know. I didn't know how to sell my product. I didn't know how to position and all that other thing. So I decided, okay, these people who are successful say do this. So I'm going to do it because maybe I just haven't worked hard enough at being an entrepreneur to be successful. So I'm going to hashtag do all the things. And now it's so weird that we're in this time now where blogging it's like a afterthought, but social media is so much bigger than blogging. But I remember when blogging was king, like if you did not have a blog, it was like you didn't even exist. And so I was doing all the things. I was blogging, I was guest blogging, I was writing articles, I was doing hashtag all the things. And I was so unsatisfied because I felt like I had to be somebody else in order to be successful. And that was the message. In order to be successful, you had to be someone else. But then I said, wait a minute. When I look at the people I admire, whether they're big or not, they're successful because they decided that they were going to do the things their way, right? Like Babe Ruth was like, I'm going to do this my way, right? Sinatra wrote a song about doing it my way, right? There are people, we love those people because they broke the mold and said, I'm going to do this. And then they broke the mold and then established a pattern. Mm-hmm. When they broke the mold, they established a pattern that everyone else now thinks is typical. One of my favorite movies is Moneyball, and it talked about, baseball and how baseball players owners used to congregate teams and have a winning team. Well, at the time, the guy who started that thing, it was new, broke the mold. Now that's not even a competitive advantage anymore because that became the norm, right? And so I stopped and I said, and this is why reflection is important. It's like, wait a minute. If I'm doing the work, but I'm not seeing the results, and it's not that I can't do the work. Congratulations, Julia, you realize that you can do the work. So if I'm not seeing the results that I'm wanting, then what's missing here? And for me, it really was alignment, and it became a spiritual connection to what I was doing and hearing the voice of God for me. So God can tell, this is why I stay out of some of the most controversial, I have no problem with controversy, but I stay out of controversial things and I don't take a side because the same God that told you to vote that way is the same God that told the other person to vote the other way. And it's the same God. And it was right for both of them because you're not cookie cutter. And what God is doing in you is different. And so that's what I started to align myself to. I was like, okay, God, well, if now I'm not trying to prove that I can do the work, what's missing here? And I didn't want to put my spiritual self on the shelf anymore. I didn't want to be this professional success, but then I can't talk about Jesus. Mm. I didn't want to be in an environment where we could talk about Jesus all day, but nobody got anything done. Because that may not happen with people you're around, Susan, right? We talk about Jesus all day, but then no one does anything. And then no one's
I'm not going to say anything.
Okay, right? Like we can, and I was like, and I found myself in one or two, and it was like, okay, you're either successful over here, but don't talk about Jesus and all that spiritual stuff. Like, don't do that. Or you're successful talking about Jesus, but wait a minute, you're striving, don't make that money, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, okay, both of those are like whack. And I didn't reject those because I don't believe those people, and they have good intentions, whatever. Here's what I recognized. That wasn't in alignment with me. And that's what I recognized. Like, I had to get to the point where I had to stop sacrificing Julia on the altar of what everyone else thinks I should do. Because, and not be, and not in this, and not in this, like, yes, we hear it all the time. You have to, you can't pour from an empty cup, right? The airplane analogy, please put on your own mask before, helping someone else. Like, we hear that. And then the extreme of that goes, I'm a martyr. I will die. I won't put on my mask for someone else. And I will die while I'm trying to go help you. And on the other extreme of that is, I'm going to put on my mask and take all the oxygen. Y'all fend for yourselves. Good luck to you. Right. And so there was these extremes, and I just kept going, God, why are the extremes? Extremes aren't, you can't live in extremes. There are nuances to so many things. And so when I started looking at all of the nuances, then I said, you know what? That's where I want to live. I want to live in this place where, guess what? Black lives matter and blue lives matter. Right? I want to live in a place where, there is, yes, I support the life of the unborn. And I also support women in their right to choose. And I'm not going to make one or the other choice. It's an and. It's not or, it's an and. And I'm going to live in that place of all of my ands. And this idea of it has to be this or that, that's what I started rejecting. And when it became so satisfying to me, and what I found was people actually like that. Right? Like some of the things that I do online, in some of my prep work for like challenges or things that I do, I tell people, hey, guess what? You know what? I'm going to talk about 90s music. I'm going to talk about movies. I've made a couple of those references already here, right? I'm going to talk about 90s music. I'm going to talk about movies. And I'm probably going to go off on a tangent where I will lose my train of thought and then go, where was I? Why did I say that? Right? And I used to hide that because professionally, that's not professional. Like, these speakers and how polished they are? And it's like, boom, boom, boom. And they make all these things and it comes back together and it's just this wonderful bow. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's so amazing. I want to do that. And then here I am going off on this tangent. Like, why did I do that? How did I get there? But the tangent was exactly what my audience or my community needed. And so I just embraced it. And I said, guess what? I'm going to go off on tangents. But they're going to be good. I promise you. I promise you it's going to be good. We're going to talk about the thing. And then guess what? I'm going to be led of the Holy Spirit. And I'm going to be on time. And I might not, and I might go over time. It's just going to be an and or. And I just started taking all of that and saying, I'm not going to be on time or spiritual. I'm going to try to do both. Sometimes I'm on time. Sometimes I go over. But what the people want and need is it's always served. And it wasn't so that is my very long answer, as you can tell, right? I'm just kind of long-winded in that. But because it's not to me, it's not as simple as, oh, this is that point. For me, it was, I got bold enough, the name of my company is Brave for a reason, right? I got bold enough to say, you know what? I think if I could be myself, that would help people, because the self that I am, I have receipts about how it has helped people. So can I always improve on my skills? Sure. I can always improve on some skills. But what I now refuse to, like the line in the sand that I'm going to draw is, number one, God's always going to be there. Number two, I'm always going to show up and I'm going to have the other person in mind. So what do I need to think? How is God? How are you, God? How are you here helping me be who I am that's going to benefit someone else? And that beautiful integration and alignment is where I've just kind of settled. Doesn't mean that I don't question and second guess myself sometimes, but it means that when I stopped and reflected on some of the things that, okay, this is what happened. How do you want me to interpret that? This is how I want you to interpret that. I was like, okay, that's what I'm going to do. So I don't know if that was helpful, it's not a straight answer like, oh, this is that moment that I recognized, hey, this is what I'm going to do. Where did that confidence come from? I don't know. There are times the confidence is there, and then there are times the confidence is like, it's gone. And I share all of that, right? You know me, like I share all of it. It's like, yep, guess what? Here's what I'm struggling with right now. And if you're struggling with this, it makes complete sense why you're struggling with this. Because now, what I don't do though, I don't share from a place until I have at least some sort of revelation that it can be helpful. So I just don't show up and vomit on people, which means there's sometimes that I don't show up as frequently because I'm like, yep, no, I can't. Because if I show up right now, I just might be vomiting on people, and that's not going to be helpful. Let me get through and then reflect and then go, okay, guys, let me tell you. Right. And that has been something that it just feels natural to me. And so I say, okay, that's authentic Julia.
Yeah. Thanks so much for tuning in today. If you want to learn more about me or any of my guests, all of the links are in the description below the video. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and share it on all your social pages. Until next time, remember that you have the power to multiply life without burnout.